So, good evening. Right. So, how many of you are coming from outside? All belong to this institute? Please raise your hands. Coming from outside. Fine. See, this is a session with relation to developments that had been happening in the areas of environment, science, and technology. Now, you know very well the fact that in the preliminary exam and, of course, in the mains exam, these two topics are playing a very vital role. And the developments need to be understood based on how the questions are asked. So that's really more important. Like, our preparation should be based on how the questions are asked in the exam. That's in fact very, very important, because superficial information may not be helping us much in terms of the things, because a question is being asked in the preliminary based on uh, the combination of both basics and current aspects. In such a scenario, what should be your strategy? Like, how do you prepare is something which is very, very important. Now, let me pick up, one such area. Like, recently we had something called EPI, Environment Performance Index, isn't it? Have you gone through that? No? See, there are so many areas, like always we call reports, indices, which are very, very important for the exam. Say we have like Global Nutrition Report, Global Hunger Index, Global Innovation Index, International Intellectual Property Index. Similarly, there are certain indices which are related to even environment. And sometimes these ranks that are given to various countries, sometimes they also run into some sort of controversy, because this time this is one such controversy. So where India very severely objected to the rank given to it in the recent EPI, Environment Performance Index 2022. First of all, remember that this EPI 2022 is what? Is a biennial report. What do you mean by biennial report? So for every twice a year, or once in 2 years. So do you have any other report that comes once in 2 years related to India environment again? State of the Indian Forest Report, India State of the Forest Report. It's also a biennial report. So in fact, the report, Indian State of the Forest Report 2021 was released in 2022 January. So in such a case, this is also a biannual report. Now this report, for example, is coming from various centers, especially in association with World Economic Forum. So again I repeat, this is an index which ranks various countries on parameters with relation to sustainability, the conditions of living, environmental conditions. So all these are taken into consideration before giving a score to the each and every country. So like, for example, out of 180 countries, India has been identified at 180 position. So what exactly here? It's like at the bottom. India is not at the bottom, it's a bottom. No, do you really think that India's environment and other sustainability indicators really fared such a level? No, that's the controversy. So last time when this report came in 2020 otherwise, so 2020, so India was ranked 168th. So now further falling down in the Environment Performance Index. So hence one should be able to understand. India contested this, in fact, saying that the conditions are not as worse, basically as you portray here. And Denmark, UK, Finland, UK, and Finland are present in the top 3. Denmark, UK, and Finland are present in the top 3 of 180 countries. If you look at the score of Denmark is 77.90, and score of UK is 77.70, and Finland 76.50. So whereas India almost like nothing below it. So India had a very dismal score of 18.90. So poorest of all the countries in this list. So now, okay, of course, as I said, the entire report is mainly based on Yale Center for Environmental Law and Policy. Yale Center for Environmental Law and Policy. In association with, so Yale Center, who made this report? So what I am trying to say is, who made this report? Yale Center for Environmental Law and Policy in association with Center for International Earth Science Information Network. Center for International Earth Science Information Network of Columbia University. So this is one such center, and then this is another center in association with World Economic Forum. So have developed this particular index. So in this index, if you take 40 performance indicators have been taken into consideration while making this entire report. So 40 performance indicators, and in fact, if you look at, India could not do better in this case, and that's the reason why we are at 180th position today. So hence this is one area, first thing. So similarly, let us go for the other such important aspect, and this is with relation to a finding, a sort of biology. Till today, or before the discovery of a new bacterium, basically what was the largest bacterium in the world? The largest bacterium in the world till recently was Thiomargarita namibiensis. Now, namibiensis, as it was found in Namibia. Now, today, we have further new larger bacteria found, and that is called Thiomargarita magnifica. So, what do you mean by this? So, magnified, that is larger size. You can easily see on the scale, what? 1 centimeter, right? Yes or no? 1 centimeter is visible, right? Now, this particular bacterium has a size of almost 0.9 centimeters. Okay, so hence the next point is with relation to new bacterium. So new bacterium discovered. New largest bacterium discovered. Largest bacterium discovered. So new largest bacterium discovered. Now, this particular bacterium has been discovered in the French Caribbean region, and let me mention this. Discovered in the archipelago of French Caribbean. So, first of all, okay, what exactly are bacteria? If I give you a question related to, say, that is, one should be able to understand that what exactly are bacteria. So, not just discussing like what are the largest bacteria. If I give you a question like this, I'm picking up some major such name which all of you know. Don't you know amoeba? Have you never heard about? Yes, you heard about amoeba. Okay, you heard about amoeba, and my question is amoeba an animal, plant, bacteria, fungus? See, it's not about just learning what is the largest bacterium is important. Because tomorrow you get a question in such a way that one among the 2 to 3 statements about this new largest bacterium, something will be asked about what? Bacteria. So what are exactly there? So in the class, I'm just giving you a simple question. Amoeba is A. Animal, B. Plant, C. Bacteria, D. Fungus. You understood that question? And what is the answer? So amoeba is an animal like us. Amoeba doesn't belong to the group bacteria. It's like an animal. That's it. It's a single celled animal. Amoeba belongs to a group of animals called, say, protozoa. Now, what does it indicate? Proto. First, zoa means what? Animals. So, hence, protozoa, amoeba belongs to the group protozoa. See, one should be very clear with the basic information. So, when I say bacteria, for example, to which group of the organisms does bacteria belong? So, bacteria belong to a group of organisms called prokaryotes. Prokaryotes. Then, one should be able to know exactly what are prokaryotes, and there is something called eukaryotes. Both need to be known. So, hence, just something is in the news that the largest bacterium has been discovered. Doesn't indicate that you by heart that and go to the exam. No, that doesn't work for the civil service exam. So you should have some background related to it. So bacteria, for example, here in this case, animals, plants, fungi. These are eukaryotes. And whereas bacteria alone in these four options are what? Prokaryotes. And again, it depends on cellular structure. It depends on what? Cellular structure again. It all depends on cellular structure. You got my point? So, I think you are very familiar from your childhood, school education. You might have studied something called a cell. Something called a cell. Yes, you have studied that. Now, basically, if you look at a cell, it's surrounded on all sides by a membrane, like a balloon surrounded by all sides by a membrane. That's it. But the thing is, you can see the balloon, you cannot see the cell. Now, inside the cell, imagine there is another balloon, smaller, and which has what? DNA, the major, something called genetic material. And have you ever come across some names like ribosomes, lysosomes? No? Something called Golgi complex? Something called mitochondria? No? Yes or no? They're all parts of a cell. As you have parts of your body, there are parts within the cell called organelles. Now, my point is very simple. A cell with such a, if it's a plant cell, you have chloroplast. And of course, a plant cell will also have cell wall. Basically, I'm just giving you some idea so that you can understand first what are bacteria before going to what is largest bacteria. So, this is a cell with a very well developed what? Nucleus. And inside the nucleus, inside a room called nucleus, who is present? The boss. Who is the boss? Genetic material. Such a cell which I am showing you here is eukaryotic cell. A cell with a well developed carry-on nucleus and remaining all other cell parts. There are some cells where there is boss, but there is no room for that boss. What do you mean by this? There is no nucleus for that. And whatever the different types of parts of the cell you find here, you don't have much, like except ribosomes, you don't have much. Now, you may have cell wall, but that's not exactly like what the cell wall the plant cells have. Now, this is a primitive type of cell where the nuclear organization is very primitive. Hence, use the word prokaryotic. And bacteria are prokaryote. That's the first thing. See, it's not like, just by hearting what is the largest bacterium. Again, I repeat. It's about knowing to which category these organisms belong to. That's really more important. And in this scenario, what I am trying to say is the prokaryotic organisms are those organisms which have a simpler cellular organization. What are they? Simpler. Whereas eukaryotic organisms have eukaryotic cells which have a complex organization with a well-developed nucleus and all other parts of the cell. So, the plants, animals, Fungi, they belong to this group, whereas bacteria belong to that particular group. And why viruses are not classified into any one of these groups? Because viruses are non-cellular. They don't have cells. They don't have cellular organization. That's a separate discussion again. So hence, first remember, bacteria are what? Prokaryotes. Bacteria, you can even make that statement also. You can write that bacteria are prokaryotes. Bacteria are prokaryotes with a primitive type of cellular organization. With a primitive type of cellular organization. With a primitive type of cellular organization. Okay, so after discussing that, now let us come to the bacterium which we are talking about. Thiomargarita magnifica. See, actually, it is there in the French Caribbean region in the mangroves, especially you look at so many mangroves growing, they have a part of their body in the water also, soaked in the water. Especially in the leaves of some of these plants, below the leaves, this bacterium was discovered. Which bacterium? Which bacterium? So such bacterium was discovered like this. Way back in 2009 itself. But later it was proved to be what? Recently it was proved to be a bacterium. But before that, it was Thiomargarita namibiensis. Namibiensis, which was actually the largest. And before that, there was another one bacterium. See, look at tomorrow, another new one might be discovered. So earlier it was Epilopicium phycelsoni. Epilopicium phycelsoni. So that was the largest. So from here to here now, here. So you should have some idea before also. So again I repeat, this is how. And remember, the Thiomargarita namibiensis, for example, it had an average size of 0.1 to 0.3 millimeters. Which one? The second one had an average size of, and even on the higher side, even 0.5 millimeters, not centimeters, millimeters has been identified. But today, the Thiomargarita magnifica has been identified at size of 0.9, almost 1 centimeter. It's like a hair of your eyelash, a single hair strand of your eyelash. So it's almost visible to the naked eye. So actually bacteria up to this sizes really is ruled out earlier. People never believed that the bacteria will be of this particular size. It was ruled out earlier. Today, now you could find out how the new thing has come up in the news. A new thing has come up very clearly in the news. Now, after that, again, there is another such related topic, again related to biodiversity, I would like to mention. New coral species have been identified where? In Andaman Nicobar Islands. Good. Andaman Nicobar Islands. So now again comes the point, like what are these corals? Again the same point. Again, what exactly are these corals? Now, the corals basically belong to which particular group of animals again? The corals belong to which group of animals? So they belong to a group of animals called Cnidaria, which is a part of coelenterata, which you might have somebody saying here. So coral is an animal, group of animals, otherwise corals. Some of these corals called colonial corals. Colonial corals. They live in colonies, hence the name colonial corals. And these colonial corals build reefs across the ocean, close to the shore. Build what? Reefs. Now a reef is a mound of limestone built by the action of the animals called corals. Now imagine a situation if this is the, imagine a situation, if this is a decreasing slope, okay, from the beach, if you observe, somewhere close to the shore, using the rocky, bottom, these animals, coral animals, they grow. Colonial corals, they grow uh, to each other across, and they try to develop a big, what is called, structure with their shells attached. So sometimes coming above the water surface, so that your navigation can be what, stopped. The coral structure, this entire massive coral structure built by these animals and with their shells, and such a barrier is called what, coral reef. Coral reef. Hence, so how can you define coral reef? Coral reef is a mound of limestone. Coral reef is a mound of limestone. Coral reef is a mound of limestone built by coral animals. Built by corals, otherwise simply coral animals. Coral animals across the ocean near to the beach. Across the ocean near to the beach. So that exactly is a simple definition of coral reef. Now, another point is this: such a shell, for example, a shelled animal, these shells act as substratum for the growth of so many marine organisms. So many hundreds of fish species, they survive here. So many different types of algae, they grow within the corals. And you can see great biodiversity. Coral reefs are considered as hubs of what? Biodiversity. Coral reefs are considered as hubs of biodiversity. In fact, what is the most productive terrestrial ecosystem on the planet Earth? What is the most productive terrestrial ecosystem on the planet Earth? Rainforest, tropical rainforest. I said terrestrial land ecosystem. Which type of, like say I give you grasslands, temperate, say first grasslands, and then coniferous forests, then at the same time tropical rainforests, then temperate deciduous. Which of these are more productive? Which of these are more, dense? Tropical rainforests. In fact, the coral reefs are considered rainforests of the ocean. So coral reefs can be considered as rainforests of the ocean. Marine rainforests, different ways, rainforests of the ocean. So marine rainforests. So that's what I am trying to say here. That the same coral reefs which I am talking here about, they are called hubs of biodiversity. They can be considered as hubs of biodiversity. What enormous! So in fact, I would like to say that more than a million species inhabit the coral reefs. So imagine some of the coral reefs, they have special symbiotic organisms associated with them, like zooxanthellae. So zooxanthellae plus the coral animal. Such a relationship where both get benefited, plus type of relationship is called mutualism. So there are so many questions earlier asked on these interactions among the animals. So commensalism, mutualism, amensalism, allelopathy. So these are the different types of interactions, prey-predator relationship among the organisms in ecosystems. Now, my point here is, similarly, there is a popular thing called rhizobium in association with what? Rhizobium is a bacterium that lives in association with roots of legumes. legume plants like say groundnut is there. All the pulses. The rhizobium lives within the roots, forms small nodule-like structures, and fixes atmospheric nitrogen for the root and gets some food from the root. You help me, I help you type of relationship. Similarly, the coral reefs are also having some mutualistic relationship with organisms, microbes called zooxanthellae. Such type of corals can be called as zooxanthellate corals. So such type of corals are called zooxanthellate corals. Now, what if azooxanthellate corals means? Azooxanthellate corals. Corals without zooxanthellae associated with them are called azooxanthellate corals. Got my point? So the addition of letter A to zooxanthellate indicates that such corals do not have this associated zooxanthellae. And now in the Andaman Nicobar Islands, the 4 species that were discovered are a type of azooxanthellate corals. Got my point? So hence have an idea where is the largest coral reef in the world? So in the northeastern region of Australia, Great Barrier Reef, such a huge barrier reef, almost 1350 miles long structure. Of course here and there now getting affected seriously. Now imagine one thing, you go to the coral reefs, you'll find a lot of things for you. You can catch fish there. You can really find the coral stone itself, you can cut the coral stone and make them into attractive beads. Hence, see these coral stones, for example, the coral stones, they have great value in jewelry. Coral stones, red corals, for example, the red colored corals, they are very famous. So hence corals can also be used in making jewelry. Corals have greater advantage for ecosystem. Now look at the sea waves coming from the ocean towards beach. Don't you expect the coral reefs to stop the energy of the sea waves? Yes or no? Yes, they do have that ecosystem value. They have a greater ecosystem service value, coral reefs. And in fact, the coral reefs are today, really they are associated with the sustainability of many coastal communities across the world. And of course, there is a lot of thing about, and here straight away if you look at the new species of corals that have been identified, all of them were considered to be belonging to Flabellidae family. So the newly discovered corals, all they belong to Flabellidae. The newly discovered corals in Andaman Nicobar islands, they belong to the Flabellidae family. And here scientific names, yes, to some extent you can use them, but I don't think that these are much important for your exam. And from that, if you observe the 4 species, so Truncato flabellum crassum. Okay. Truncato flabellum crassum. So this is one species. So similarly, there are 3 other species which were discovered called incrustatum, T. incrustatum, and then we have T. aculeatum, and the 4th one is irregular. So these are the 4 species of new azooxanthellate corals identified in the Andaman Nicobar Islands. Okay, so please try to understand here in this case. Then again I repeat, today what is the most important really threat to these coral reefs? pollution is threat. Now see, a lot of threat is coming from various factors. Overfishing is one factor that is going on. Over exploitation, for example. Now, over a period of time, you can see that these corals coming above the sea, gradually a lot of deposition from the sea waves make it almost an island, so that you can construct what houses and big buildings also. So even that activity in different parts of the world are also really affecting corals. Now, corals are also being affected by ocean acidification. See, this is one important area for even your mains exam also. Ocean acidification is one important area. Really, do you think that the ocean waters are getting acidic? Is that true? Is that correct? That's the reason why we are giving the name ocean acidification, isn't it? Basically, see, the pH of the ocean waters are coming down. The pH of the ocean water is coming down. Yes, we know that. But it's not coming down 7 so that we can call it really acidic. So it's a sort of, like a name which really doesn't indicate the process. See, the gradual decline in the pH of the ocean waters. Gradual decline in the pH of the ocean waters due to what? Excessive dissolution of atmospheric carbon dioxide. Excessive dissolution of atmospheric carbon dioxide. Excessive dissolution of atmospheric carbon dioxide is called ocean acidification. Again, I repeat, the gradual decline in the pH of ocean waters, the gradual decline in the pH of the ocean waters due to excessive dissolution of atmospheric carbon dioxide. Now, why the atmospheric carbon dioxide is increasing, we all know. So that human is really, burning a lot of fossil fuels in terms of petrol, diesel, the crude oil based fuels, and we are burning coal. We are even degrading the forests, which actually are the sinks of the carbon dioxide. Carbon sinks otherwise. So all these factors are resulting in increase in the atmospheric carbon dioxide. Today, as per IPCC reports also, it's very clear that the atmospheric carbon dioxide has crossed more than 400 ppm, which is really a very big problem, and already many impacts of climate change have turned into a condition of irreversibility. So in such a scenario, if more and more carbon dioxide is released into the atmosphere, and this excessive carbon dioxide dissolves in the seawater, then that results in what? Carbonic acid. And that carbonic acid, excessive atmospheric carbonic acid in the seawater is resulting in various impacts. Say for example, calcification of shelled animals is very important. Similarly, people also have found impact of ocean acidification on the coral health. Especially the symbiotic organisms associated with the coral reefs are at the risk of death and loss. So thereby the coral reefs gradually over a period of time they lose their productivity, affecting the entire coastal communities, affecting the ecosystems of the marine systems across the world, tropical oceans especially. So like that, my point is, please try to understand. This is what the few new species, and I don't think that this is really so much in terms of what is called names, but at least having an idea that new species have been discovered where in the Andaman Nicobar Islands, and some idea about the coral reefs, both are important. Okay, so next, and another aspect that the world is facing today, especially a country like India is facing today, is what? India is facing today the big threat of heavy dependency on crude oil. Do you know how much actually crude oil we have imported in 2021-22 as per Petroleum Planning Analysis Cell? Do you have any idea about that? According to Petroleum Planning and Analysis Cell of Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas, for the year 21-22, India has imported crude oil worth $119 billion. That's very huge. How much? $119 billion. Now, why we are importing so much amount of crude oil? Are we drinking crude oil like water? No, it appears like Indians are drinking water, and also crude oil. That's the reason why we are, really depending very heavily, on massive amount of crude oil. Imagine if you look at what has been in 2020-21 during the pandemic. So India has imported roughly like 62.2 crude oil worth $62.2 billion. But there is no big difference as such in terms of what? In terms of the amount of the crude oil. So just about 200 million tons of crude oil we have, imported in the year 2021-22. How much? So about 200 million tons. And earlier, also in the pandemic year 2021, so we imported something around close to 196 million tons. And pre-pandemic year, so 2019-20, 227 million tons. So heavy dependency on crude oil will have its own problems. Of course, India is having a lot of such what is called its commitments to Paris Agreement. And recently, the Prime Minister also talked about Panchamrit, enhancing India's contribution to the Paris Agreement. That's a different and separate discussion. But here, what about self-sufficiency in the fuel sector? Now, what are the various different alternatives that you can say? What are the various different alternatives that you can talk about with relation to the crude oil? What do you think are the various different alternatives? See, I said, what are the different alternatives? I said, do you think that just one alternative is enough? Do you think that one alternative is enough for the crude oil based fuels? No, we have to develop as many as different types of what? Alternatives. Am I right? So hence, among them there are less polluting and among them there are non-polluting. So we have, say for example, we have CNG, we have LNG, and then we have, electric EVs, that are becoming more and more famous nowadays. We have hydrogen based vehicles. Apart from these, we are also having something like biofuels. Yes, biofuels. A recent decision has come on with relation to biofuels. That's the reason why we are picking up this. Now again the same point, you should have some clarity exactly on what are biofuels again. So clarity on what are biofuels is very, very important, because again you can get a question in the preliminary as well as mains. Now what are biofuels? How can you define biofuels? Living organisms. Is that the definition of biofuels? You get them from plants. Okay. Yes. You get them from organic material. See, biofuels are fuel chemicals like ester, esters and alcohols, derived from biomass. So again I repeat. So what are biofuels? Biofuels are fuel chemicals like esters and alcohols derived from biomass. That is exactly biofuels. I'll give you an example. So what is basically biofuel means? What exactly biofuel? Do you give example for that? What is biomass in general? Now first tell me what is biomass. Biomass is nothing but the dry living matter, that's it. So you take an organism and squeeze out the entire water, what is left then? The dry matter. Of course the organism dies, that's a different thing, but whatever the dry matter is there of the living organism, that is biomass. Now if you are using some biomass and you try to obtain a fuel out of it, then you call it as a biofuel. And mostly the chemicals that we are using today as biofuels are what? Esters and alcohols. Have you heard biodiesel? You know biodiesel? Biodiesel is nothing but methyl ester or ethyl ester. And you know ethanol now, which is in the news, ethanol blending, EBP, ethanol blending petrol. I'll give you a simple way of, defining or otherwise simple way of understanding this biodiesel first. Biodiesel and of course bioethanol. The word bio indicates that fuel is coming from biomass. That fuel is coming from what? Biomass. That's the reason why we are calling it as biodiesel, bioethanol. So since both of them, they are made from the biomass. I'll give you one example here. One easy way to understand. Let us say suitable plants are there for you. Some suitable plants are there. Now you take those suitable plants, okay, and then get the seeds from these suitable plants, get the oil, and you go for chemical modification. Of course, chemical modification. Now you get something called methyl ester. Just methyl ester, or otherwise ethyl ester, depending on what you heat with the oil. Ethyl ester. Now such an ethyl ester or methyl ester is called biodiesel. And what are the main two suitable plants for biodiesel production in India? So Jatropha curcus and Derris indica. The earlier previous name of Derris indica is Pongamia pinnata. So these two are not edible plants, first of all. So we require such plants only. And these two can grow on any type of wastelands. That's the plant we require. We can't, produce biodiesel from the what is called the oil seeds. Can we? Should we? No, the edible oil cannot be used for biodiesel production. So we are using this Jatropha curcus and Derris indica. We try to extract the oil from the seeds and heat the oil, say, with methyl alcohol. In that process, glycerol gets separated and you get methyl ester. If you heat the same oil with ethyl alcohol, you get what? Ethyl ester. Such a methyl ester or ethyl ester obtained is called biodiesel in simplest form. Similar, and this methyl ester or ethyl ester is called biodiesel. And what we are doing is we want to blend it with what? The diesel that's available, that is petrodiesel. We want to blend it with petrodiesel. And that blending, so B5, B10, what do you mean by B5 blending? So B5 blending means 5% such biodiesel and the remaining 95% what? The petrodiesel or the diesel, simply. So imagine throughout the country, whatever the diesel that is being used is of this blend. What does it indicate? That we are really reducing the consumption of diesel as a whole by 5%. Similarly, the ethyl alcohol, otherwise ethanol obtained from biomass is called bioethanol, the second such type of biodiesel. Of course, biobutanol is also emerging as a biodiesel, but coming to ethanol first. So bioethanol. And where from bioethanol can be produced? Again, biomass. Today in India, as of now, much of the bioethanol is coming from what? Sugarcane. Even though India's biofuel policy wants to produce the same bioethanol from broken rice, damaged potatoes, you know. So even though we are trying to produce this bioethanol mostly from other starch based materials, but now today much of that is produced from sugarcane. Bioethanol is mainly produced from sugarcane. Yeast fermentation of sugarcane results in what? Sugarcane juice results in production of bioethanol. Now such a ethanol can be blended with petrol, and you call it as what? Ethanol blended petrol. Ethanol blended petrol. And now the government of India has recently approved some amendments to the biofuel policy 2018 and advanced the blending. See, India initially wanted to achieve 20% of blending of the petrol diesel fuels by 2030, and India now wants to advance it by 2025-26. You got my point? So what do you mean by advancing the blending process? So we need to, we have decided to achieve otherwise 20% blending 5 years before the original target. So that is, in such a scenario, again the questions come not just on, what is in the news. Again, some questions, the question statements will be with relation to even what is there and what exactly is this biodiesel, what exactly is bioethanol, where India is producing. Developed countries like UK, USA, they produce much of their bioethanol from corn or maize. But we cannot produce that, in such a way, because so if you use more and more agricultural and food products for producing what? Bioethanol. So what happens to the food availability, food inflation? So food versus fuel competition, starts. And many years ago, United Nations clearly warned India and China not to simply copy the policies of what? America and Britain in using food to fuel conversion. So hence my point is, so recently amendments were approved by the Union Cabinet to the National Policy on Biofuels 2018, and the amendments approved including the advancements of the target of 20% ethanol blending in petrol, advancing the target from 2030 to 2025-26. So that is, so it's like everything, like achieving very early. National Solar Mission, for example, when it was launched in 2010, January 11, 2010, what was the original target? What is the original target? 20,000 megawatts by 21-22. Now, in 2014, that target was raised to what? 1 lakh megawatts, otherwise 100 gigawatts. And today, we have achieved an installed capacity, almost 56,000 megawatts. So, yes, good, more than half of what exactly we wanted to. Much more than what exactly originally we had. So there is a need for increasing the overall production of renewables, increasing the share of renewables within the the total installed power capacity. So as a relation, so India definitely has great advantages, and of course there may be some limitations with it. So accordingly, you can get a question in the preliminary and mains. So you may be asked to write about the limitations on biofuels. You may be asked to, like, biofuels are gaining a lot of importance in India's fuel sector. In such a scenario, so how can you see that the biofuels are an advantage to a country which is heavily dependent on crude oil, and at the same time mention limitations associated with the biofuels? This is how a question can be asked. So hence, whenever you read a particular topic, you should have both perspectives. One is how it can be asked in preliminary and the background associated with that, and the second one is with relation to what, how it can be asked in the mains. Is there any such chance, and if at all, how the question can be asked? See, getting into IAS requires some work, and that particular work is based on the basic fundamental rules, and if you follow the rules, you'll win the race. If you don't follow the rules and stick to them, you will lose out in the race. Okay, in the next time, again we'll come up with new topics and discuss. Thank you.